Posso?
Sì.
Distinguished guests, leaving no one behind. This is the topic of today's RoundMed dialogue. And there are very few doubts that the young generation may be one of the great losers in the COVID war, the one more left behind. Education, employment, social life, and individual freedoms are all challenged at the same time, and young generation, while sidelined in present opportunities, will be in the future in the front line in paying back public debt, which is piling up in all countries. Today, RoundMed's meeting, today's conference, promoted by ISPI, the Italian Minister of Foreign Affairs, and co-promoted by the Organization for Economic Development and Cooperation, both represented at a very high level by Deputy Minister Sereni and Deputy Secretary General Schlagenhauf. Today's meeting will address how COVID is affecting young generation in the MENA regions, which is to say in countries where these challenges are merging with pre-existing challenges, which in many countries had led to mass protest in the last month of the previous year and the beginning of 2020. Two main questions will be central in our discussion. The first one, how can government deliver on specific needs of young generation? The second one, how can government regain trust and build society that leave no one behind? I wish to thank again the co-organizer. I wish to thank the panelists and all the participants in today's panel, and Ambassador Bernardini, which will close up the session. And I now yield the floor to Deputy Minister Sereni. Marina, you have the floor.
Thank you, Paolo. Distinguished guests, young leaders, ladies and gentlemen, it is really a pleasure to welcome back the MED community after the summer break and open this virtual panel organized in partnership with ISPI and the OECD in preparation to the 6th edition of RoundMed Dialogues. I would like to thank the permanent representative of Italy to the international organizations in Paris, Ambassador Bernardini, co-chair of the OECD MENA governance program, for his support in making this event possible. Today's discussion will be focused, as Paolo said before, on one of the most pressing issues to be addressed across both shores of the Mediterranean. The pandemic is severely affecting young people all over the world. They are among the most vulnerable groups if we consider the long-term economic and social consequences of the crisis. Economic forecasts are not promising. We will have to cope with the worst economic recession since 1929. According to the OECD, global economic activity in the best case scenario is expected to fall by 6% in 2020. The virus is having a severe impact on young people's jobs, diminishing their employment prospects. According to an ILO survey, 1 in 6 young people aged 18 to 29 has stopped working as a result of the crisis, and many of them are still without employment. COVID-19 is also disrupting the education and training sectors, causing delays in learning processes. According to the OECD, in the first half of 2020, 1.5 billion young people in 180 countries were affected. Low-income countries tend to be particularly affected, as technological gaps undermine the application of distant learning methods. The situation is even more challenging for youth in the MENA region. Almost half of the population is under 25. Already before the pandemic, a quarter of those has been unemployed. This is the highest rate than in any other region. And it is even more difficult in countries undergoing conflict and institutional instability. Let me mention the case of Libya, suffering a youth unemployment rate of 50%, the worst rate in the MENA region and the second highest globally. All over the world, but in MENA region in particular, young people have very limited access to political processes, institutions, and policy making. The protest movements recently observed from Algiers to Khartoum, from Beirut to Baghdad, have been mostly led by young people asking for fairer, more transparent, inclusive, and representative institutions. COVID-19 has acted as an accelerator and as a fragilizer. We may now say that the king is naked. The pandemic is showing the best, but also the worst of our system. The EU, for instance, has demonstrated the resilience of its social model, in particular of its healthcare. It has also demonstrated its determination to cope with the long-term social and economic consequences of the crisis through a vast array of measures, including the Next Generation Fund. But this is not enough. The crisis also highlights some structural deficiencies in our societies across both shores of the Mediterranean. We observe rising inequalities, the degradation of social mobility, the uneven distribution of opportunities, the internalization or precarization of our economic system, corruption and patronage, and the mechanism of a rentier state risks to be enhanced, directly affecting the youth, especially in the southern shore of the Mediterranean. But we are aware that young people have gathered all their strength, courage, and energy, and are working hard to rebuild their societies. It is thanks to the youth, in fact, that the issue of climate change has become central in the international agendas. As COP26 co-presidency, we will foster the engagement of young generation and will organize back-to-back with a pre-COP the Youth for Climate in order to offer young people from all over the world the opportunity to develop concrete proposals for pre-COP in Milan and COP26 in Glasgow. We must continue supporting young people's call for inclusive reforms. This is a crucial step to develop together an inclusive, positive agenda in the Rome-Med dialogue spirit. The current crisis should be seen as an opportunity for governments in the enlarged Mediterranean to innovate and bring about social and economic transformation by engaging youth and ensuring that their role in society is strengthened. Italy and the EU stand ready to give adequate support to the southern shore of the Mediterranean through ad hoc cooperation initiatives, both at a bilateral and a multilateral level. The MENA-OECD governance program, a strategic partnership between MENA and OECD countries, is a concrete example of how we can work together to improve good governance, empower youth, and keep up the momentum for reform processes in the MENA region. We have been traditionally very supportive of the MENA program since its inception phase in the OECD. With the contribution of the Italian National School of Public Administration, Italy hosts in Caserta the OECD Governance Program Training Center, which plays a key role facilitating exchanges and capacity building. Moreover, the Italian Development Cooperation is supporting the OECD MENA program with bilateral projects in the region. An example is the program we have in Lebanon on open government and digitalization, a particularly important area for young generation. Placing young people at the core of our societies must be an utmost priority. The integration of young generations in the economy and all aspects of political life is crucial if we really want to ensure a full and sustainable recovery from COVID-19 crisis. Thank you very much.
Thank you and good afternoon. Let me jump in since I have the pleasure to chair this fantastic panel today. I am Chiara Lovotti, Associate Research Fellow for the Middle East and North Africa program at ISPI. I wish to start by thanking the Deputy Foreign Minister, Marina Sereni, for her insightful introduction, which brings us into the topic of today's discussion. I, of course, want to welcome the OECD representatives and, of course, also our young experts who will help us shedding light on their respective regions. And allow me also to extend mine and my colleagues at ISPI gratitude towards Miriam Allam and Pietro Gagliardi. You are not here in our screen today, but your constant support has been fundamental in organizing this session. And let me also stress that today's event somehow strengthen the partnership between ISPI, the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and the OECD, specifically in the frame of the Rome-Med dialogues. Someone might remember last year we held, when we were able to meet in person, we had a session together specifically devoted to unpacking the challenges faced by young generations. And this year we want to push our partnership even further, and we will jointly shape, with the cooperation of other organizations as well, we will jointly shape what we have called the Youth Forum Contest, Ideas and Projects at Work. This is an exercise that we want to repeat this year based on last year's, I would say, successful experience. I see my director is saying yes, so I suppose he agrees with me. And it's about a competition. We will select a number of youth from the Mediterranean and Middle Eastern region to submit and present their entrepreneurial proposals, ideas and projects in terms of post-COVID recovery and COVID impacts management, let's say, and be they in the field of healthcare, access to education, green recovery, urban development, and many others. And if you allow me to advertise a bit, we will launch the call for application in a few days. Hopefully by the end of this week. And since I know we have a very big audience listening to us today, it's such a pity that we cannot see each other in the face. I'm saying to everyone, if you have any idea, any project, please check on both ISPI's and the Rome-Med Dialogues website for the call, which will be launched soon. So advertisement over, but in a way this was a way to say that the importance of the role of the youth in societies, in building better societies, and in public policy making is at the center of our work, of our organizations. And it is particularly so when it comes to the Mediterranean and Middle Eastern region, and it is even more so today that the COVID-19 has amplified and exacerbated existing challenges. I will not repeat data that have already been said, and I'm sure we will discuss later, but the MENA region is a very youthful one, yet unemployment, it registers one of the highest unemployment rates on earth. And indeed, this is not surprising that since a long time already, actually, even before the COVID-19, in countries across the Middle East and North Africa, trust in national governments among the youth has collapsed. This is one of the results, if I'm not wrong, of one recent publication by the OECD, highlighting that only 32% of young people across 12 countries in the MENA trust their government. This is a very low percentage, quite worrisome, I would say. And of course, COVID crisis has further amplified this perception of ineffective governments across the region. At the same time, we should also look for the bright side, if any, and even though the risks of COVID crisis for the future generations are there, they exist, and will remain high for future generations to come. This is also an historical moment which offers governments across the Middle East and North Africa the opportunity to really change something in their society, in their economies. Youth and COVID-19, leaving no one behind. This is the topic, the title of our discussion today. If I may add to Paolo Magri's questions before, another one which I would ask to our speakers, what governments in the MENA region can do to rebuild trust among the youth, and what your organization specifically, I'm looking both at the OECD representatives and the young leaders that have joined us today, what your organization can do to promote this process. So I will not steal any further time, but before muting myself, I should give a few technical instructions. After the 4 interventions from the youth and the Deputy Secretary General of the OECD, Jeffrey Schlagenhauf, and I hope I pronounced it properly, we will have a Q&A session. Thank you. That's encouraging. We will have a very short, about 20 minutes, if time allows, Q&A sessions. So for anyone in the audience who feel like asking questions, please don't be shy. Do it through the Q&A chat here below, and you are very, very many people, so I will do my best to collect as many questions as possible. Trying not to leave no one behind, but if I will do, I apologize in advance. Now I will definitely mute myself and give the floor to our first intervention from Joana Hammour, Grant Manager of Nahnoo, based in Lebanon, Beirut. So Joana, can you give your fresh perspective on what we have been discussing so far? Thank you.
Yes. First, hello for inviting me to the panel. I'm happy to be among you. So regarding the COVID-19 impact on youth in Lebanon, I was discussing this earlier with my colleagues who are, like, in the NGO, the average age is about 28, I think. And I wanted to see their perspective on things. And we all had the same comment, is that actually the crisis that Lebanon was living before COVID happened, COVID hit really Lebanon in March, but we have been living in a crisis, economic, political, and social from some time, and especially that exploded in October when the revolution happened, or uprising. So those issues actually were intertwined together. The COVID made it worse. That's what happened for the youth here. But unemployment was already at a very low level. People were already seeing their salaries reduced, and education was already a bit in shambles because of the uprising, and the youth was really involved in the protests. So all of this, we were already living it actually for months, and then COVID happened, and things got worse, but we were already in that boat actually. So that's the situation in Lebanon, and of course the youth are very impacted by that, as they were during the economic crisis, as they are. Employment, education, even mentally, it's been really hard on everybody, but the youth, especially, like throughout my conversations with youth people, there's a very bleak image of the future. They feel like they don't have any future, actually, no prospects in the country, very few opportunities, and especially depending on your background. And but it all pushes them to leave the country. So we've already experienced that brain drain for especially during the war and difficult situations. But really, this time, you really feel like the first thing that a young person wants to do is leave the country. Like last year, you could feel, for example, the difference is that some people are still believing in the country, believing in that they can change things, but this has really diminished. And it's now more difficult to find someone who has hope. And unfortunately, this is a vicious circle, this brain drain, because with the youth leaving, then we have less talented and efficient people living in the country. And at the same time, it's a personal choice. It's also a preservation choice. So it's become almost a consensus. And but the good thing is that the people who are like the youth living in the country are very active, very dynamic, very talented, and they've been coping with the difficult situation while trying to overcome the challenge of COVID. And this has not stopped the protest, for example, although we did feel that the government was using the situation with COVID as an excuse to kind of put pressure on reducing the protest, and which is very dangerous, of course, for the freedom of expression and our rights. Also, we can see that there are lots of inequalities also that are coming into play between the refugees, for example, in camps who are more vulnerable, and then more privileged youth who have the opportunity to be more covered and protected. There's a big gap between that. But again, there are lots of initiatives on the ground, and NGOs also who are replacing basically the government, which is practically inexistent. Thanks to this dynamic civil society, we're able to advance, to try to move on, and for the youth to be able to express themselves as well and to get help. So we're thankful for this society.
Thank you, Joana. Thank you very much for your point. I will now yield to Nidal Benali, Cherkaoui, President of Local Youth Councils Network based in Morocco. Nidal, if you could also give us your fresh perspective on these subjects, and maybe also elaborate a bit more on what your organization does, because we might be very few in this panel to know it, and I'm sure you want to explain this to a bigger audience. Thank you.
Hello, my greetings to all participants. I would like first to thank the organizers for inviting me and for inviting the Moroccan Local Youth Councils Network, and also as a Moroccan youth in general. And also I would like to express our solidarity with the people of Lebanon and Yemen. Actually, the answer to that we can answer it by asking the question what every government did during this crisis. And I would like to talk about Morocco and what we did in Morocco in both levels, in the government level or or also as a national organization. First, since the confirmation of the first case of COVID-19 in the kingdom, the authorities and government stopped the flight with many countries. And we can say that Morocco took a string of measures since day one of the first case to contain the spread of the pandemic first, and by closing also the mosque business and shops. Then we went to another step where after that the king under the king construction and his majesty idea, the government established a special fund to help families in need and people without work. Actually in May, last May, Morocco's special fund to fight coronavirus has reached $3.2 billion. A big part of that fund were allocated to the health ministry to buy new medical equipment and devices necessary to deal with the COVID, but also to support in the second step the national economy in order to absorb the negative shocks caused by the pandemic. Actually, the young Moroccans are standing in front line since day one. Our organization in the Moroccan Local Youth Council or other ones did a great work and did a great job, either by supporting public authorities and healthcare workers and using our energy and innovation for good vibes. And for us as a Moroccan youth and also as a Moroccan Local Youth Council, we did some voluntary work, of course, by distributing food package to families affected by the health emergency, face masks. We feel that it's our responsibility as young leaders to support the public authorities and the brave efforts of the healthcare workers. And it's our duty as young people to impact other people. And we did also actually use our social media accounts on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and also Snapchat to spreading awareness to all people around Morocco. And now actually we are in a new project to support the distance learning for students in all levels. And our goal today is to go beyond providing e-learning during crisis time. And I can say that the conclusion for this crisis show us or teach the government or also NGOs or also young people that the real change always should come from local level, because most of cities were closed on each other, and we should think for a new way to do and to make a change from local level and not from national level. Because we believe in the Moroccan Youth Council that the real change always will come from a local level.
Yes, thank you, Nidal, for stressing on this, on the importance of having also a bottom-up approach to these issues. I will now hand it over to Hayder al-Shakeri, based everywhere, if I understand correctly, but youth advocate for Iraq and overall very much engaged in Iraqi civil societies. Please, Hayder, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chiara. And of course, thank you to ISPI and OECD and to the government of Italy for hosting this event at such a timely, in this timely manner, because it's very appropriate to talk about the situation right now of COVID-19 and then the inclusion of youth. I would like to address the issue of youth participation in decision making and how that is very important. And we can see already from the report that OECD is publishing or from the panelists' different speeches that there is a lot of focus on on the role that youth, what will be the role that youth will play in the future. And if they don't participate in the decision-making process, there will not be any role for them in the future. Of course, once youth are engaged, they will, given their fresh perspective, they will have a variety of approaches, and young people will have a say in their future. And we can already see that in the report. There will face a lot of economic problems in the future, and this future is their future. The people who are ruling right now, the political elites, the different governments, they will not be staying for much longer to witness the problems that youth will have to deal with. And specifically for governments and for countries that are facing conflict right now, facing instability, we can always count on the UN Security Council Resolution 2250 on youth, peace, and security, and how youth engagement and youth participation is crucial in such situations. In the case of Iraq particularly, Iraq is one of the most youthful countries in the world. There are over 60% of the population under the age of 25. And we can see that this population is not taken seriously by the government, by local governments, by decision makers and the political elite, and often sometimes by the international community as well. And that's why I really like this event and how it's focusing on that segment of the population. So often youth are sidelined. They are not being asked on what their opinion is on the different matters, and usually they have to be part of the status quo. If not, they're often fought. Sometimes they're taken into custody. Sometimes they're even assassinated if it goes to extremes. However, this did not stop young people from trying to participate, from trying to engage, from trying to be part of the different aspects of decision making. So in Iraq, for example, just like in Lebanon and Morocco, there has been a lot of youth initiatives, there has been a lot of volunteering groups, there has been a lot of groups that have formulated, and they started to discuss various topics, and they started to try to pose their opinion and talk about the different problems they've been facing. There has been a lot of volunteering and kind of initiatives to help the different communities and to try to do the job that the government or the local governments or the different officials are not capable of doing. And then recently there have been an emerging entrepreneurial sector where young people being angry at the situation, being frustrated, they starting their own businesses, starting their own initiatives, and trying to address the problems within society. And for them also that is useful. And of course, there are always protests. And since 2011, Iraq has been seeing protests that have been renewed constantly. And in October 2019, there has been a major protest that's still ongoing until now to try and voice the sound and the voice of the young people who have been sidelined. During the COVID time, youth initiatives also shifted their attention towards talking with the people, raising awareness regarding the disease and the pandemic, and even trying to raise some funds to buy some equipment, medical equipment for hospitals, or even an oxygen tank that the government could not provide. And you can see that COVID-19 hit the entire globe really badly, but in Iraq specifically, cases have been increasing and increasing with continuous lack of attention from the government, and very, very badly handled. Young entrepreneurs have started to look at opportunities to help and to raise awareness, to collect data, and even to do some basic research on COVID-19 and how it's spreading in Iraq and how it can be stopped. And then, of course, the protests are ongoing, and they're continuing towards the political elites, towards the system that is not just it's not allowing youth to participate, but it's also fighting youth when they try to voice their concerns. So imagine how those initiatives and how those different groups and different work that is being done by young people would be if it's being supported, if it's being nurtured and not fought. There will be major efforts. So the answer to the questions is through youth participation, decision making, through youth inclusion, there will be a lot of fruitful outcomes that will come in the future.
Thank you so much, Hayder, and thank you to the three of you. I think we all feel inspired by your talks, and even though you deem your job is perhaps normal, I think each of you makes a difference with what he or she does actually in their countries. I also see that participants are keeping asking questions through the chat, so fantastic. Don't stop. And it is my great pleasure now to hand it over to the Deputy Secretary General of the OECD, Dr. Jeffrey Schlagenhauf, for delivering his intervention. So please, Jeffrey, if I may, the floor is yours.
Thank you much, Chiara, and to ISPI and MED for the excellent cooperation we've had over the years. I think today's discussion is very timely, as youth are at risk of being affected the most by the socioeconomic repercussions of COVID-19. So let me first thank the young leaders that have shared their views and insights and priority with us today. This is where I scare the people who work with me at the OECD a little bit by saying I'm going off script and say, I know we have very young people here, and you might say, what's this old guy have to offer? But I'll sit there and say that both my boys, age 33 and 30 right now, have sort of had the double whammy. They've had the financial crisis and the COVID crisis. So for younger people, this for me is very much on my mind. The OECD recently published a policy brief on the impact of COVID-19 on young people and what governments can do to mitigate the crisis. Our analysis builds on responses to an online survey of 90 youth-led organizations in from 48 countries, including Jordan, Lebanon, Morocco, and Tunisia. These organizations express the strongest concerns about the impact of COVID-19 on mental health, education, and employment, as well as limitations on personal freedoms. This perception is backed by evidence. Young adults have experienced higher levels of loneliness and distress during the pandemic compared to other age groups. We see this even at the OECD with the number of very young people we have working for us who were during the confinement trapped in their apartments, not able to talk to anybody other than over iPhones, other devices, or Zoom meetings. So this is really critical moving forward. 110 million school-age students in the MENA region are affected by the closure of schools, universities, and youth centers. The adjustment to e-learning opportunities has been difficult for youth without easy access to internet, without a personal computer, or without even a quiet space to work at home. OECD estimates show that a lost school year is equivalent to a loss of 7 to 10% of lifetime income. That's a big number. Already before the crisis, the MENA region had the highest rate of youth unemployment in the world, exceeding 27% on average. COVID-19 has exacerbated the situation as young people often hold temporary contracts or work in the informal sector, a sector which frequently offers no social protections and no possibility to work remotely. OECD evidence demonstrates that COVID-19 has accelerated existing inequalities. For example, containment measures have increased the risk of domestic violence for young women, as well as the amount of unpaid care work they undertake. Young women frequently take care of the sick and elderly. The situation is also particularly alarming for the 14 million displaced people hosted in Jordan, Lebanon, and other MENA countries, many of which are young people. In 2018, only 32% of young people expressed their trust in government across 12 MENA countries, compared to 46% across OECD countries. Both are terrible numbers. Hosting one of the world's youngest populations, it is more timely than ever before for governments to create conditions in which young people can thrive, flourish, rather than being perceived as a risk or a challenge. Young volunteers play a crucial role in ensuring the resilience of our societies. Across the MENA region and beyond, they have helped mitigate the impact of the COVID-19 crisis. For instance, by running awareness-raising campaigns and by providing support to the elderly. In Tunisia, youth organizations have been offering online courses for kids to learn entrepreneurial skills while at home. Most recently, youth organizations have made an essential contribution to the crisis response in Lebanon following the disastrous explosion in the port of Beirut. Yet young people continue to be a largely untapped, often ignored group of partners for governments, and are underrepresented significantly in public institutions. COVID-19 has demonstrated the importance of public governance in ensuring the well-being of today's and future generations. Governments should engage youth in finding solutions to the crisis and promote age diversity in state institutions. Effective responses to the crisis need to build on reliable, age disaggregated evidence in order to support and address the various layers of inequalities among youth from different socioeconomic backgrounds, ethnicities, and gender. New investments into youth policy and services across the MENA region should be complemented by efforts to strengthen coordination across government and with civil society to better monitor and evaluate what works and what does not, and to engage youth on an equal footing. It's worth remembering the words of George Marshall in 1947 when he launched his plan for the reconstruction of Europe, which also is the historical forebear of the OECD. He made a number of comments, and I just want to mention a couple, one of which applies today. The situation in the world is serious. Quote, "This is the business of Europeans. The initiative, I think, must come from Europe." In a similar way, all generations in MENA must engage in a dialogue to plan future trajectories of their countries and build back better. The OECD, notably through the MENA-OECD governance program and its dedicated center in the city of Caserta, hosted by the Italian National School of Administration, stands ready as the house of good practices to assist governments and public officials in this crucial undertaking to help design and deliver policies for better lives. And I'll close with just a very personal comment. Recently, I did an interview in which I was asked, what's the best advice I would give to young people moving forward? And I know each of us live in different countries and situations, but my plea to the young people today, step up to the plate. Tell people what you think. Take a role in determining your future and the future of your fellow citizens. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deputy Secretary General, for your inspiring intervention. We are now running a bit late, so I will not make any further comment and will open to Q&A immediately, so hopefully we stay in times. We have received both questions addressed to specific persons and general questions. So if you agree, I will go this way. I will collect 3 or 4 questions and then allow for a second round, going by the same order that we've gone through so far. And so that each of you can react to any point based on his or her preferences. So there are a couple of questions on the role of the EU and Italy also in when it comes to what actually the Deputy Foreign Minister was mentioning before, the cooperation, so Northern Southern Shore cooperation. And someone is asking, I would like to ask if the EU countries have taken any supplementary measures that can help the youth of the countries of the southern shore of the Mediterranean, of course, in a post-COVID framework. And in this sense, there is another quite pessimist question, I would say, but I will convey it anyway. Someone is asking how much really can cooperation from the northern shore help the southern shore? I will leave it to you, the answer. I won't have one. Another question is on Lebanon. Do the panelists think that the youth's dissatisfaction with governments might lead to renewed protests in the MENA region and especially Lebanon? I think somehow we are already witnessing this in countries, especially like Lebanon, Iraq, but also North Africa. So I will leave this question open to both either Joana and Nidal. And then another interesting one, specifically about young females as an even more vulnerable category. Actually, I was when I was preparing to these events, I came across some worrisome data from the World Bank, if I'm not wrong. 35% in Egypt, 45% in Palestine, and 75% in Yemen of young females are so-called NEET, not in education, employment, and training. It means huge percentages of people in these countries are basically without a purpose in life. So this girl is asking how can we specifically address the challenges of these young women. Someone also was mentioning before this in his intervention. And then my personal question, if I may exploit my role as a chair to this panel, to the Deputy Secretary General of the OECD. You mentioned the paper that you elaborated with your organization, which I found, which I read, and I found very helpful, both for the topic that it tackles and for the fact of being grounded on scientific evidence. It's very difficult to gather reliable data on social issues from the Middle East and North Africa. Could you perhaps elaborate a bit more on what are some key policy messages that you would address to governments in the region? I hope I made myself clear. I will again mute myself and so repeat the same order of before, starting from Deputy Minister Marina Sereni. And I beg you to keep your answers quite short. Thank you.
Thank you, Chiara. I will be very brief. 2 points. The first one about the European Union initiatives and policies for young people in the southern Mediterranean area. We can mention 2 main fields. The first one is the neighborhood south neighborhood policy. That is programs bilateral EU and several countries. Each country in the southern Mediterranean shore, and I think we should ask for the next financial framework to have money, enough money for the southern neighborhood, and inside that money we have to pay attention to youth particularly. But this is still in our discussion, because you know that there was an agreement about the next MMF, but we do not have still the final decision that is still in the discussion between the Parliament and the Commission. So we need to put a particular attention on this point. How much money will Europe deserve for the Mediterranean area, the southern neighborhood, and how much inside this money will be devoted to initiative, particularly for youth people. On the other hand, the second initiative that is related specifically to youth is Erasmus+. The program is it's open to some countries of the southern shore of the Mediterranean, and in the past I have checked the data from 2014 to 2017. 32 different institutions from the South Mediterranean countries were involved with initiatives that were for education, training, and so on and so forth, related with young people in these countries. The countries with the highest rate were Morocco, Tunisia, and Israel. So this means that we have space to improve this program, to open it to other countries, and of course to work with other countries to involve more young people. The second point that I wanted to put on the table is this one. Stability is a condition for reforms. I have understood the question. We as government, we have to talk with governments, of course. We have to cooperate with governments, and this is a point that we cannot avoid. If we want to cooperate, we have to find a partner, and the partners is first of all the government. On the other side, I understand very well that if we look at the countries of the southern Mediterranean area, most of them need reforms. And in that countries, we have to dialogue, we have to open a dialogue with the civil society organization. That means, first of all, young people organization. So it's very important for me, both as a country and as a European Union, to have this double track, to cooperate with governments, to help them, to support them, to have the strength to decide in their own countries. But on the other hand, we have to put human rights, freedom of expression very clearly as a condition to dialogue and to cooperate with governments.
Thank you, Deputy Minister. In fact, stability of governments is quite an issue and somehow relates to the other question. I now hand it over to Joana. Always keeping to stay brief. Thank you.
Yes, I think the question of Lebanon was about the process, and as you said, the process had been revived actually for some time ago. The lockdown, the first long lockdown that we had for COVID, indeed kind of suppressed actually these protests. And as I was saying, it was dangerous for fighting for our rights and freedom of expression, and using the public spaces also, because we were banned from our own public spaces due to the COVID. But this hasn't lasted so long, and the protests were revived. They have changed though. You can see the atmosphere, and even the majority, let's say, of the participants of the protest have transformed. And also the issue has transformed, because before we were mostly and everybody was really in the street to ask for a better government and no corruption, etc. And now people are on the street because they're angry and they're hungry. So it's more like it's anger that comes for basic needs, even more than before. And COVID has not really stopped that. People are taking their precautions, and they're going on the streets. And just this weekend there was a big protest outside the presidential palace. I mean, the area of the presidential palace. But at the same time, people are also the youth, because as was mentioned, the society is mostly youth, actually. They are also very busy with the reconstruction and with providing help also to the population and the youth, especially from mental health to financial, etc. But yeah, the protests are still ongoing.
Thank you, Joana. Thank you very much. Nidal, if you want to jump in with a comment as well, I always beg you to keep brief. Thank you.
Yeah, actually, what is amazing in that type of initiatives and conferences, that we can give us the chance to share good practices, and also share ideas to use it to bring back the trust to young people, and also to fight this crisis. I will be very brief in 2 points. I want to mention an initiative that we did in Morocco, that we can also, other countries and other young people can do it in their countries. Some youth, we created some websites to fight against fake news. Because nowadays, and especially with the pandemic and this crisis, we suffer from fake news and fake numbers. We educate the public about the importance of fast-checking social media posts to avoid creating the public panic. The second point is I want to mention that the title of this conference is "Leaving No One Behind." So we should make sure to bring that collaboration and support between the countries, between the NGOs, and between everyone here to the real plan, and not leave that only in words, to make sure that we will not leave someone behind us after this crisis. So thank you so much again for this invitation.
Don't even say thank you for being here, Nidal. I hand it over to Hayder. You may want to address the question on how dissatisfaction among the youth may cause further protests. I'm asking this as you are a representative of the Iraqi community. Thank you.
Yes, of course. I mean, protests started for a reason, and they will continue until that reason is addressed. And those people on the streets, they have nowhere else to go, whether it's Lebanon, whether it's in Iraq, whether it's in other countries. We saw that, sometimes in Iraq, for example, since October, hundreds of people have been killed and tens of thousands have been injured, with multiple people who have been disabled, multiples of hundreds of people have been disabled. And people will not go back now. They have nothing to lose. Either they leave the country or they keep on protesting. And despite COVID-19, despite all the situations that have been happening in the country, protests are ongoing in various protest squares across the country. So they will not just reignite; they will continue until the demands are met. But when are the demands met, and what's the cost of this? I don't know. It will take some time. I just want to touch upon the question of aid really quickly. I second Deputy Minister's point on the governments. They have to collaborate with governments. But they also need to work closely with civil society. Sometimes, like for example, in the case of Lebanon and in Iraq, to a huge matter, collaborating with the government proved to be not functional. For Iraq, for example, for the past 17 years, governments have been spending trillions of dollars in aid on Iraq without really a good outcome. And I wonder whether it's still worth, the EU and the different countries, when they spend their aid, spend it on the countries, talking with the governments. So I really second the Deputy Minister's point. Collaboration needs to be on multiple instances and with different actors. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hayder. I second your points as well. Then, of course, it depends on how developed a civil society is. But you know this. I hand it over now to Jeffrey Schlagenhauf for his comments, if he wants to reply to my question. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. I think that the OECD prides itself on being a very data-driven, evidence-based institution. And one of the challenges in this time has been not just when we bring in countries outside the OECD who are like the MENA region or other places, but even within the OECD. How granular is the data we have? We think we know things, but it'd be nice to have the data to actually prove it. So I think one of the challenges is how can we improve data collection moving forward? And I think that's one place that I like this sort of analogy of you don't do a big thing necessarily, but you can do little things to sort of influence governments to collect more data and actually be able to provide it. And I know particularly in this region, this can be a challenge because of cultural, religious type challenges moving forward. But I will sort of put the Italian government on the spot here and hope the ambassador doesn't mind it too much before he closes the meeting later, that, Italy taking up the G20 presidency is going to be in a very unique position to, as part of its agenda, say, we need more data to have more understanding, because without the data, we're not ever going to be able to meaningfully advance an agenda of taking everybody, youth particular, women, gender particular, into account with what we're doing as initiatives worldwide. So I say that off script, but just want to encourage the Italian government to do what it has done many times in the past, to take the lead on pushing forward an agenda that is focused on youth and is focused on gender, because I think those are two really important things to address moving forward.
Thank you so much, Deputy Secretary General. Of course, I share your view on the importance of evidence and data when making research and designing public policy. That's fundamental. I will now, as I anticipated before, and speaking of leaving no one behind, I of course couldn't read all of your questions. I am sorry about this, but you know my name. You can find my email address on ISPI websites, and if any of you want to repeat the question to my email, I will be happy to either answer or try to convey the answers of others to you. I'm sorry, but time is running away, and to this purpose, I will immediately hand it over to Antonio Bernardini, permanent representative of Italy to the OECD and co-chair of the Middle East and North Africa OECD governance program, who is going to deliver the closing remarks for this event. Please, Ambassador, the floor is yours. And of course, if you want to comment on any of the points that have been raised so far, you are more than welcome to do it.
Thank you. First of all, let me thank ISPI, the Italian Foreign Ministry, the OECD for making this initiative possible. Being a co-chair of this OECD MENA in these months in many of this initiative to discuss the effect of COVID in the region. For sure, COVID has been a tremendous kind of hurricane in our own societies, creating enormous challenges. We have seen, and in the intervention, the roundtable, have been mentioned the number of problems that this pandemic has created. Has been a challenge with a lot of impact in terms of economic challenges, social challenges, exclusion, increasing the inequalities, gender problems. I think that we have seen all the worst things that we could imagine. But at the same time, I think that in the middle of this enormous crisis, there has been also the capacity of the societies to respond to the crisis, to find a solution, to identify a solution to cope with the enormous problems that the pandemic has created. In some discussion, and I've seen in many experiences, including in Italy, but also in countries in the southern part of the Mediterranean shore, the crisis has created opportunities for experimenting new way of the governments to deal with this problem, with some positive effects that could be a lesson learned to introduce new way of working and to new ways of inventing a relationship between governments and the population. As been mentioned in the intervention, one of the big problems in the recent times is the lack of confidence of the population towards their own governments and towards the institution. One of the lessons of the crisis is that there is a demand for institutions to work properly to respond to the challenges of the societies. And this is something that we have not to forget. So the discussion and the exchange of information is very much important. I think that this exchange of information between participants from MENA countries and participants from OECD has a lot of value, especially now that we are confronted with a major challenges. I think all the discussion now is focusing not only on what is still the problems of the pandemic, but basically we are all concentrating our attention on how we can shape the recovery. And we are all thinking that recovery should avoid the mistakes of the past, should create new opportunities. The discussion is very intense, for sure it's very intense in Europe, it's very intense within OECD, but I think that there should be no illusion that any recovery, any vision of the future could exclude countries. I mean, this will be a mistake that we have done in the past, cannot be repeated now, and whatever discussion we have in the recovery, the sustainable growth that we have in mind should be inclusive and should include countries of MENA. In this context, I think that the issue of youth, saying that no one should be left behind, should not be a slogan, should have a content. And the content is the way we will be able to transform our own societies, to find a solution to create economies for the future that can give an answer to the expectation of the youth and to be able to create more just, open, and rich society. I think this is more than a slogan. I think it's what we need to do. And I believe that these initiatives that we had today are a very good example on how we can promote this discussion, keeping in mind that the youth voice needs to be heard in each country, needs to be heard across the Mediterranean in order to shape a better future. So I wish to thank you again, you all, for this initiative. I hope that we have some other opportunities in the future to continue this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, for the hope you are giving to us. I share your point in that our work, the work of our organization is more and more crucial. And it seems to me that listening to our young leaders, especially, it seems to me that even though there might be some distrust on local governments and their respective countries, it seems to me that no one here has given up on politics in general, or on the idea of being part of our societies and doing something good. So I think this could be a good takeaway to close our session with. I thank you everyone, Deputy Minister Marina Sereni, Deputy Secretary General Jeffrey Schlagenhauf, Ambassador Antonio Bernardini, Hayder, Joana, and Nidal. Sorry if I just go with your names. And I do look, Paolo Magri, of course, and my colleagues at ISPI who made this event possible. And I do look forward to our next meeting, which I hope will happen soon in the frame of the Roundtable dialogues. Thank you so much to everyone and our audience, of course.